us following this very, very short commercial break. Probably would have killed himself too.
I think so. I think so.
If he had a chance, you know, later on. You know, I mean, how can you kill 17 folks and live?
Yes.
You know, really. I mean, if you have a chance to sort of get out of that, but that's a terrible thing. I mean, it's. Okay, but we're ready, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know when you talk about despair and all those, I mean, it adds a different dimension, a psychological thing in terms of what we're talking about, and I really appreciate that, to talk about some of the things. Thank you, and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. CPoe, and he's giving us some information in reference to dreamers and gun violence. And of course, Dr. Poe, I think when we had our first segment, you gave us background information. So let's start off by giving you a free opportunity to talk about gun violence, immigration, dreamers, and that kind, all of those kind of things that come together that promotes, in a real sense, I think you're indicating, gun violence.
Yes. Now, I want to just make some comments about despair. Now, despair is a condition that probably affects more the subconscious than the conscious, even though there are manifestations in the conscious mind of a person who's in a condition of despair. Now, despair is defined as a sense of hopelessness, helplessness, worthlessness, and oftentimes if a person is in a condition of despair, they'll have an urge to take their own life and or an urge to take the life of somebody else. Now, I think that mass shooters, by and large, are in a state of despair, and I think that being in a state of despair has a tendency to cause them to become delusional, having false thoughts, and to believe then that somebody else is a threat to them. It may be a religion, it may be someone of the opposite party, or it may be an ethnic group. You recall the shooter, Dylan Roof, that went into the church and killed 9 people. His delusion was that he felt that Afro-Americans were taking over the country, and therefore his effort was to kill in order to prevent that from happening. As I was about to say, that despair may manifest itself, for example, as addiction. It may manifest itself as violent fantasies. I recall that Nicholas Cruz bragged about having guns, bragged about shooting up the school, bragged about killing animals, and the couple that took him in knew he had an AR-15, but they also believed that he wasn't a violent kind of person. So I believe that Cruz eventually would have committed suicide. And I want to say that if a person is in a condition of despair, they are more likely to be primarily suicidal, much more than homicidal. Except when the delusion kicked in, that they feel threatened, then they are likely to become homicidal.
To eliminate the threat that they feel.
To eliminate the threat. To eliminate the threat.
That makes
sense. By the way, psychosis is one manifestation of despair. People who are psychotic oftentimes hear voices. They feel threatened by those voices, or they may also see things, and they also will manifest bizarre or unusual behavior. So there are many manifestations of despair. Now, one other manifestation is rage and bitterness. People who are in a condition of despair are often bitter and they have trouble controlling their anger. So I want to make those points quite clear that in a condition of despair, a person is more often suicidal than homicidal.
You know, and of course, Dr. Poe, I see where gun violence can fit into what we're talking about here, because these are the folks that become so overcome with despair that, as you indicated, that they're suicidal.
Yes.
And they don't mind if you're going to take your own life.
Yes.
Another life does not matter at all to you.
Yes.
Is that what we're saying?
Yes.
Well, now, Dr. Poe, if we think in terms of despair and people who are caught up from a psychological point of view in reference to despair, then the argument that this was a mental problem, not a gun problem. Now deal with that, because because I think that when we talk about, and especially when we talk about trying to put limitations upon the ownership of guns and et cetera, a lot of folks say that it's not the gun problem, it's a mental problem.
Right.
And being in a state of despair brings about a mental problem. So would you say that Cruz was affected not with a mental problem, but the access that he had to guns made it very possible for him to do what he did?
Well, I think it's a combination of both.
Okay.
He obviously had some mental health issues, okay? But it's also, he also should not have been able to purchase an AR-15, okay? An automatic weapon, and plus the fact that he had quite a bit of ammunition on him. So he should not have been able to purchase that gun with the history of some mental health issues. So I think it's a combination of both, not just mental illness, but also a combination of access to guns. And so, and that's why it's so disheartening that the Florida legislature would vote against a ban on assault weapons.
Out of all things, and that seems to be an easy vote, because there are not many things that you can use an assault weapon for. And an AR-15.
Yes.
I mean, why? I mean, that's almost like you destroy a tank almost with something like that. And,
Yes.
To have that, speak to that.
Well, I think that part of the problem has been recognized, and that is, I think the NRA donated about $30 million to Trump's re-election campaign.
216.
216?
Yeah.
216 million?
Million to, yeah,
Oh, really?
that's right.
Really?
That's how much,
Really?
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And also, and so I think that the NRA has a kind of a chokehold on the Congress, and so on a lot of their representatives as well as their senators. And so I think that was the reason why the Florida legislature refused to vote to ban or even to take up the issue of assault weapons.
Okay, and of course we're going to take our second commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience, excuse me, following this very, very short commercial break. All those children went out to Florida, and the state. See, the thing about it is that children have parents, and if you've got all these young people that are involved with concern, the young people influence their parents.
True.
And so, in a real sense, I think that this is a movement that might be able to undermine some of those individuals that are in Congress, because if they are 15, 16 years old, they can't vote. But if they are interested and they raise enough sand around the house and et cetera, it becomes a part of what? The parent.
Amen.
You see, and the parents can vote.
Yes.
You see, and I think that this is happening in some of the cities, some of the elections that we're having here. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Dr. CPoe, and he's talking about dreamers and guns. And of course, Dr. Poe, let's see if we can pick up during this final segment dealing with the efforts to try to deal with all of the guns that we have, either from a mental point of view or from a psychological point of view, however you wish to deal with it.
Now, I understand that there were about 42,000 suicides in 2016. But usually the suicide rate is lower than the homicide rate. And so I believe that there's a relationship between despair and gun violence. So there are a whole lot of people who are victimized as a result of homicide as well as suicide, because oftentimes people who kill themselves leave a legacy of self-blame on the surviving family members. Oftentimes the family members ask the question, I wonder if I could have avoided it. I wonder if I could have prevented it. So of course now that is also true of homicides. The incidence of gun violence, gun-related violence is very, very high in our society. And so we need to do something about guns. We need to make people who have a history of mental illness not able to purchase guns. We need to enact legislation which will make people who have a criminal background not able to purchase guns, because the violence that's committed in this country, both on the suicide level as well as on the homicide level, is just staggering.
And it's all connected with the availability of guns.
Absolutely.
You see, and the power of all of these guns.
Yes.
It seems that there's so much opposition, and people talk about the Second Amendment to the Constitution and that you must have a gun and et cetera. But I don't think this, well, you know, I've got some views in reference to the Second Amendment, but I don't think the Second Amendment would allow you to take a gun to a college classroom, you know, after having been in a college classroom yourself. You know how threatening it would be to be able to teach a group of students, and knowing that any one of the 30 or 35 that you might have might be armed. You see, but I think that, as a matter of fact, I think Tennessee is talking about the personal carry arm.
Yes, that's true. And I think the NRA's position is that everybody ought to have a weapon. Okay, unfortunately, that's their position. I want to say a word about dreamers. I think it's very sad that the Congress and or the president can't come up with a pathway to citizenship without tying in to billions of dollars for the border wall.
Border wall.
I also think that, I also am informed that they want to end the chain migration thing. And so it's really sad. It's very sad and very disheartening to recognize that the Congress and or the president can't find a way to allow these persons a path to citizenship.
Especially that chain migration
Yes.
idea that you talked about. I think this is the idea that will allow a person who is here to reach back to another country and bring one of his or her family members there.
Absolutely.
And that's the way immigration has worked all along. I mean, we put a name to it now, calling it chain migration and relationship migration and et cetera. But that was a standard way that immigration was carried out. A person who will leave a country, arrive in the United States of America, establishes himself or herself, can now look back over and bring and from the very early beginning of immigration to the United States of America, it has been that system. And now we want to change that?
Yes. These people were brought over as children, in many cases, due to no fault of their own, brought over by their parents who were undocumented. And so to send them back to their country of origin, most of them have no relationship at all to the country of origin. It's just cruel.
Well, now,
it's just cruel.
Yeah, well, now, I would think in terms of African Americans in this country. You know, we became citizens after the 13th and the 14th Amendment gave us citizenship. But now, how would it be to any of us to think now that somebody would come and say, well, you know, you're in the United States of America, but we're going to send you back to your country. If everybody went back to his or her country, then the only people that would be around here would be people who are native to the United States of America. And so I think that that's a very, very important consideration that we have to understand where people came from. We all came from somewhere.
That's true.
And we're here now, and now we want to build the wall to keep people out, drop the ability for them to bring their relatives, and then who are we going to bring here to this country?
True. Well, it seems as if maybe Trump would like to allow people from Norway to come in, okay? And of course that suggests that there may be a racial bias there.
It's obvious that there's a racial bias in there.
And let me also go back to gun violence just a moment. People in a condition of despair are most likely to crave attention, okay? And I think that Nicholas Cruz did in fact say things and do things to crave attention. As a matter of fact, I'm convinced that he would eventually commit suicide because when a girl broke up with him that he was seeing, he started cutting himself, okay? And oftentimes we see that in females and males who've been severely abused early on in life. They have a cutting addiction. They tend to cut themselves.
That's all psychological thing.
Yes. I mean, but it's like if you're in a condition of despair, you just want to hurt yourself or you want to hurt other people. I mean, because of the bitterness, because of the anger, because of the rage. So I think he would have eventually taken himself out. He would have eventually committed suicide if he wasn't arrested.
And so in a real sense, we have a real problem in this country, Dr. Poe,
Absolutely.
in terms of trying to, and this is the problem of recent origin, too, because this immigration has never been a real problem in terms of the United States of America, and now it's something where people are trying to send people out and raise fences and not allow people to bring their relatives, close relatives. These were very, very close relatives, mothers, fathers, and sisters and brothers, and et cetera. And so I think that it's that kind of idea that is very, very, it's not America. It's not America, because America has been open, and each group that comes here has a place here. And so, anyway, we've got about a minute and a half left, Dr. Poe, but I just want to thank you for bringing that information, and I think it gave me a better understanding in terms of the health aspects of gun violence. You see that if somehow we can deal with the problems of health, but even with whatever problems of health we deal with, we're going to still have 5 or 6 guns for every person in the world. So we got to do something about guns.
Absolutely. And I think that despair makes people more prone to be violent towards themselves and or violent towards others. But people who are in despair are much more likely to be suicidal. They're much more likely to harm themselves than someone else.
Very good. And of course, Dr. Poe, let me thank you for bringing that excellent information, and to apologize for not being able to get in touch with you over the last several months. Okay. You see, because I think that you bring a very, very important understanding to some of the issues that we have to deal with, and I want to thank you for that. And let me encourage our audience to tune in again next week for another informative edition of Comments. Thank you, and good morning.
Right here? Oh, okay.
Take out all those things.
Yeah,
around
yeah,
your neck.
yeah, I got you. I got you.
'Cause that might interfere with
Okay,
transmission.
got you. How you been, Dr. Haney?
Oh, I've been well.
Okay.
I've been well. Yeah, I guess we'll be ready to go in the next couple of few minutes.
Do me a favor, count to 10.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
How's that?
That's
Gotcha.
is that good? Okay. You heard about the evangelist this year?
Billy Graham? Yeah. 99 years old.
So was the oldest minister at Selma University that just passed away about 2 years ago. He reached 99. Dr. C.A. Lett. It's not working?
I don't know, we're just rubbed up against the
Yeah, you take your eyeglass,
Oh, what is this? Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Oh, it's caught in there.
yeah, that cord.
I got it.
any little movements, we're going to hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, take that off.
How's that?
Yeah, that's good.
So it won't hit
Yeah,
the
right.
microphone.
Gotcha. Is that better?
Sound like just
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Ah, okay. Try to,
I got some paper in there.
I don't know, it was hidden up on their shirt.
It was. Let me just get that out.
I made it so it doesn't, because it's brushing against it. Ah, crap.
Dr. Haney, is this the first recording for you today?
No, this is number.
Number 4? Okay.
We're going to try.
No, this is what we call this, bro.
You said health, dealing with health care?
African American.
Okay.
Health care, yeah.
Deal with that.
Yes.
Not going to work here.
Coming from a medical family, you know.
And what's that green jacket that means? That also means.
Medical, it's focused on medical music. You know, strub jacket, strub shirt.
Oh, is that what it is?
Yeah, that's what it's representing, strub shirt, and I got the church clipping on there.
Yeah, that's just lower too.
The shirt's in the way? Take it off.
Well, we don't have to take the shirt off. We're
Yeah.
just all right. We should be good on that.
Okay.
So, Brother Taylor, you ready to talk about African Americans and health? Okay.
Health, yes. From the perspective of health in our, just overall, you know, there's a lot of things that's affecting our health.
Okay. Okay.
Is he ready?
Now, that's your camera over there.
Oh, it's my camera? Okay. I should get a little
But
water.
I'm your
Oh, yeah.
camera.
Okay.
You watch me and then
Okay.
those cameras pick you up automatically.
Okay.
You see, but you just deal with me.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How does that? Yeah, so you just look at, don't you worry about the cameras. You just, and don't move that chair. It's because we got those lines back there.
Yes.
And when you move those chairs, the image come up. Those
Okay.
lines jump.
Come up.
So
I get it.
just, just try not to
Okay.
move it. Thank you and welcome to the show this morning. The topic this morning is African Americans and health. And we have to talk to us about African Americans and health, Minister Gregory Taylor. And Minister Taylor, let me welcome you to the show this morning.
Thank you, Dr. Haney.
And tell you how delighted we are to have you with us, because you've been with us on a number of occasions, and each time you give us excellent information. And so we sort of anticipate the topic that we have to deal with this morning, and that is African Americans and health.
Yes.
Before we get into African Americans and health, Minister Taylor, let's have you to talk about Minister Gregory Taylor, to give us some information about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of leading you to us this morning. And then we'll have a 6-minute statement, and then we'll come back for after our break, and then we'll have 8 minutes, and then we'll have another break, and then we'll have 10 minutes.
Okay.
All looking toward giving our audience at least 30 minutes
Yes, sir.
of you this morning.
Yes, sir.
And so let's start off, Minister Taylor, by talking about your background, your education, and some of the things that were important in terms of bringing you to us this morning.
Yes.
And then we'll be able to get into other aspects of what we're doing here.
Yes. Dr. Haney, and to the audience, I'm Gregory Taylor from Northport, Alabama, and I come from a medical family. And my sisters were nurses. One went to TSU, and being that we are a medical family, I feel I have a lot to say about medicine, medical African Americans and healthcare. But Dr. Haney, before I do that, I want to acknowledge Mr. Paul Harper over the Harper's restaurant. He's under the weather. And when I first moved here, I used to sit down and talk with him at Harper's. And he used to tell me people need to hear what I had to say. So he invited me there first to speak. And then there is my pastor, Dr. Wes Harvey. When I was just a lad in church, he said that before young folks got on drugs, Mom and Daddy was already taking pills, you know? And so these things have helped to shape me in terms of my understanding of medicine and health and this kind of thing. And I'm looking down here because, you know, we have someone in the audience, oh, that's my good friend now, I didn't realize it. But in terms of health and what I'm seeing today, I will use this term, and he used to mention the fact about the fourth, before young folks got on drugs, Mom and Dad was already taking pills. But now this is the other point that I want to make, is simply this, in terms of health. I have seen how emotions has affected our community, and terms from the 60s era, and I wanted to say something about customer service. I was trying to think of a way on my way here to tap into something that's connected to everything. And so customer service came to my mind. And when I say customer service, it goes way back, a long time. One of the CEOs, Coca-Cola, says that good customer service is America's future. And this is what we are dealing with here, is America's future. And when I say that, I have a vision that's connected to what I believe this country has to do with its continuing to be free. My father was in the CCC. He was in the command of the General George C. Marshall, and he was the supreme commander in the World War II, in the Asia, the Marshall Plan and all of that. So through my father and the CCC, we are connected to a lot of these things. And then the other side is, I grew up afraid of the voice of Dr. MLK Jr. I did not listen to his speeches. This is how I am misunderstood, and I have not OD'd on the MLK dream. I'm not suffering from mental indigestion of the 60s. And early in the 60s, when I heard his voice, and today we're dealing with a lot of things concerning mental health. It's needed in our churches. And I believe that today there should be more discussions in our churches during worship time, not preaching and singing, but more discussion of people problems and things of this nature. And so this is why I felt I could say something about health care. My grandmother and my mother used to take care of the sick in the community, you know, and in doing that, it's passed on down through the family. They became nurses, but to be honest with you, they were crooked nurses. Now, I just have to be honest. We are in a time where it just can't, I'm just not talking to be talking. I'm concerned about the future and safety of the community. And what I have inherited from Alabama is what it means to be safe. And that's what I grew up with in my church. Dr. O.S. Harvey was the soundest Baptist minister in the state of Alabama. So, and I understand emotions. And in Selma, in the early 60s.
Okay, and so what we'll do, we'll take our first commercial break, and we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break.
Okay. They set me off track. Yeah, okay, I appreciate that. Yeah, you're from Alabama, so I'll take that. I'll take that. No problem. Okay.
Now, what we want to do, you do this. We come back with 8-minute segment.
Okay.
Okay. Now,
Okay.
you think you can deal with this 8-minute segment dealing with African Americans and health and say something about that?
Yes, and I will have to use myself as an example because of the health the conditions in my family, you know, and even myself. I'm carrying the wounds of my father from World War II, you know, and so it's all tied in.
So we're going to have 8 minutes.
Okay.
And so you want to devote those 8 minutes
Okay.
to talk.
Okay.
Get off that paper. Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Minister Gregory Taylor, and he's given us some information in reference to African Americans and health.
Okay.
Pastor Taylor, let's see if we can pick up where we left off
Okay.
during the second session of this show, and give you an opportunity to continue our discussion dealing with African Americans and health, and perhaps use a couple of personal examples if you so desire. But go on and talk to me.
Yes, I do desire that, Dr. Haney. And the reason for that is my birth follows the death of a son. He was light, bright, dandy white with blue eyes. So behind my brown eyes are blue eyes. So I'm saying that to say I was misdiagnosed as being bipolar in Atlanta. I was wrongfully hospitalized 47 times for something that I didn't have because the family was misinterpreting my fear of MLK's voice. His voice is embryonic. It has affected the unborn child when the mother can be pregnant and don't even know it. Do you follow what I'm saying? Because this is very serious, and I'm speaking on behalf of the young people who can't talk for themselves. And there's a saying that says a child may not know how to tell you how you made them feel, but they know how to feel. And you know, it's not easy sitting up here with the scholar in my presence who specializes in the studies of the great civil rights leader. But the thing is this, it causes me to go deeper. You know, my mother was listening to the speeches when she told me she was pregnant before me. And my brother died from what is called an atelectasis intracranial hemorrhage, where injury to the neck caused the lungs to collapse and the brain explodes in the skull. There are several individuals I know whose mothers was pregnant and listening to the speeches of MLK. And after the child was born, one went to jail, and while he was in jail, he was telling his cousin, don't think like MLK, we can go to jail together. Can't build enough jails for us. That's what they're building today. They're not building any other houses. And then the other part of that is, being that I was misinterpreted, Dr. Donald Williamson in the Vital Records Office in Alabama found my brother's death certificate. And it was not able to be found by Van Hughes Funeral Home, whose name is on the death certificate. They couldn't find their copy. He got 2 graves. My mother got 2 birth certificates. My father and mother gave birth to 2 sons who were both born on the birthdays of American president. So innately, there's something in my person that is connected to this country.
Oh, very good.
Yes.
And so in a real sense, when you talk about some of your experiences dealing with health, and you also indicated that your father was a part of the CCC program.
Yes.
Now, exactly how did he fit into the CCC program, and explain that, and and perhaps if you have some personal information in reference to the operation of that program, and I also understand that you've been quite involved with it.
Yes.
You can further enlighten us in reference to that.
That's a very good question, Dr. Haney, because the CCC have a granite rock on the Bicentennial Mall. It's about 75 feet away from Dr. J. Robert Bradley's granite rock. And their wishes are, if this generation see fit to recognize them with songs of praise, they will consider that their reward. And we have taken Dr. Bradley's music and we are honoring those men. And no one cared to, one of the generals said, no one cared to communicate or to work with me here in Nashville. I can accept that and understand that because I'm a purist when it comes to music. We didn't march, rock, or clap in the street. None of that is in my memory. And then the other thing in Tuscaloosa, my father in the CCC, he never lost a soldier in World War II. So those things, you know, are honor to me in telling that General George C. Marshall that these men training is what won World War II. And they were the undernourished sons of the Depression.
Okay.
Undernourished. And that is something, you know, that's in my family that has been handed down.
Well, were the CCC individuals, are those are the individuals you are stipulating were undernourished sons
Out of the depression. Out of the depression.
How do you explain that? Explain that to us, to my audience.
Now, I was born in 55, you know, and I am under the influence of my brother's life, where he was born August 27 and he was buried August 28, 1953, same day Emmett Till was buried. And my brother was buried on a day, but that was the same day Emmett Till died 2 years later. So it is all connected, and in the area of the CCC, it is, I mean, it's such a great program. Here in Nashville, there are several individuals who are the grandchildren of the CCC. I happen to be one of the sons of about 30 of those who are left, you know, and we are still keeping alive that memory. It's a great program, and in the book, This New America by Dudley, and I think it's Oliver, it says that the CCC was FDR's greatest project.
Okay.
You know, and it's an incredible vision in it. And the other thing, Dr. Haney, is this. I don't feel good when I hear people talk about houses and land, because see, my father lost everything that he worked for as a result of the MLK movement in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And I have no apologies for that because of who he was and what he has done for this country. And so what I'm saying is, I got his CCC papers and found out that I had inherited a farmhouse, and his military property.
You were able to get the CCC papers, the
Yes.
Civilian Conservation Corps papers
Yes.
of your father.
Yes.
And how were you able to acquire those?
Well, I had heard my mother and father talking. She would be saying that he was in the CCC when he was about 18. They had to go away. They received $30. They kept $5 and
Okay.
sent $25 home to the family.
Okay.
But all of this is connected, Dr. Haney, and in the book, The Third Wave, by the fellow who founded AOL, those 5 things that are in that sector, education, food, housing, no, not housing, transportation, education, and energy. Those 5 things, I'm an embodiment of those 5 things that are just now coming on the scene today. And so these are, I'm very thankful to have this opportunity to share this. And also, there is a U.S. attorney, there's a not a U.S. attorney, but a U.S. Army criminal investigator that we are connected to, because back during that time, others had these kind of problems. When they come out of the CCC in World War II, they couldn't find their property and things of this nature.
And so your father got caught up into this whole situation of
When he come out.
after leaving the CCC
Right.
program and whatever. And
Yes.
so what we'll do, we're going to take this second commercial break.
Okay.
And then it'll give us an opportunity to come back and
Okay.
further elaborate
Okay.
upon some of these things that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. negative impact that he's had upon people and et cetera. Well, that's a bunch of nonsense, especially we've got a man over here who's a Martin Luther King scholar.
I know it, and this is why. This is when he come in here. I didn't recognize who he was. Then when I recognized him, I wasn't gonna hold back. They taught us when we come from.
You got to recognize who you're talking to. You talking to me, and
I
don't
know.
want you to be talking about Dr. Martin Luther King.
Yeah, but I didn't know he was gonna come in here. He didn't do that before. You know. I feel like I've been set up.
You ready? Okay, this
Okay.
5, but we've got 10 minutes.
10 minutes, okay.
10 minutes for this.
Okay.
Go and talk about the. Thank you and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Pastor Gregory Taylor, and he's giving us some information in reference to health and African Americans and health. You want to
Yes.
continue that?
Yes, Dr. Haney, when I first started doing my research on the music of Dr. J. Robert Bradley, he sang that my childhood favorite. And see, I see his music as fertilizer to help being therapeutic. And Dr. Reuben Green in Memphis, I think at the Central Baptist Church, there's a gentleman from Canada by the name of Virgil Bew who came here and did his thesis in the old devotional music of the black church. Today they don't do nothing but read a scripture and play a song. But that is the most therapeutic music in America. And Dr. Reuben Green said, where African Americans still have the devotion in church, he said they don't really need to see a therapist because their therapy is in their music. And as you would hear them say, how I got over, you know, how I got over, all of that, you are debriefing yourself from the struggle that you had gone through. And Dr. C.T. Vivian told me to stop saying old spirituals and say only spirituals because he said they are the only one in the world. And so what I'm simply saying here, when they left the church and rewrote the songs, Dr. Riff Patton told me here in Nashville that they got the most moving, uplifting, and powerful song. And they changed one word in it, then they sang them in the street the next day. Nobody has ever addressed who they were when they came back from the street, because they brought protest music back into the church, and what they're doing now is worshiping in a form of protest. Like the church I come up in, we were not allowed to rock, march, clap. We had to stand behind the old people and catch the spirit of their struggling that was in their music.
And do you think that all of this had a therapeutic impact upon people? The very, very music that was played during the period, or that they sang during the period, would help to alleviate some of the issues that they ran into when they went out and went to work, and the kind of work that they had to do, and they carried this music into the fields and to the factories and everything. And so you think that this had some kind of impact, real sense upon how African Americans were able to deal with some of the issues that they had to deal with, recognizing that they didn't have many opportunities to go to pay for physicians.
That's right.
And in a real sense, there was such a small number of physicians in terms of the African American population.
That's true.
And so they were able to get most of their therapeutic.
That's right.
And most of their health things.
That's right.
Through music.
And the first minister I heard say that was Dr. Robert Franklin Roberts, a former minister at ITC, president of Morehouse School of Medicine. He said that, and it is just something in the music. And Dr. Brad Shower at Emory University, who was a theologian, musician, and professor, he told me that great suffering produces the most beautiful music. And see, we don't have that music today. I just finished a class with Robbie Fryer at Vanderbilt. They know we don't have our music anymore. And this is why I believe that those who have made all the money off of the black music, African American, they need to help the senior citizens. They need to help the homeless. And speaking of that, this past MLK holiday, when I was on my way to class, and this is something he said, and I have asked the president of these colleges to put the holiday celebration on college campuses and take it off the street. And I just heard this candidate Black who said that those who are getting in the way and marching in the street, that they should be locked up. I believe that. Because why? Because I saw how the civil rights movement destroyed everything my father worked for, and I was just in the 3rd grade, and they have not heard this. Dr. C.T. Vivian said when they left the cities, he said they didn't look back.
And so in a real sense, the health that you're dealing with is a therapeutic kind of health that comes directly from the music.
That's right.
And you think that African Americans should buy into that more in terms of some of the things that they do now in terms of trying to deal with some of the issues that they have in health.
And Dr. Haney, you should give me the Nobel Peace Prize for this. It was Dr. MLK Jr. who said that music was the soul of the movement.
Yeah, that sounds.
He did. In the book by John Spencer, he said that protests, and it was the music, praise and protests. Dr. MLK Jr. said that music was the soul of the movement.
Well, now, I think you mentioned Dr. Bradley on a number of occasions. Now, what impact do you think that Dr. Bradley's music itself, the singing, I think you've indicated that in some church situations today, people tend to move away from these old spirituals into a modern form of explain how health can be impacted by therapeutically by some of the music that Africans sing in church.
Well, Dr. Haney, you know, when I first, as I said, Dr. Robert Franklin was the first heard to say about it was therapeutic. And Dr. Virgil Buell, he's a Canadian from Vancouver, Canada. He and I met on Fisk University campus, and we discussed the music Caucasian. And he also was the one who shared with me that when African Americans get enough troubles in their life, that they will return to the old songs. You know, they will forsake them. But we were taught by the late Dr. Woods Harvey to always stay near the church where the old songs are sang. And when I was in Atlanta, I used to call back to Alabama on my AT&T calling card and get my devotional music. It was just that important to me to keep me going, you know, and it's just something about it, and it's needed today.
And you think that more people we could deal with some of the issues that we have within our community, homelessness,
yes,
violence,
yes,
teenagers, and et cetera. You think that if we were to become more involved with this kind of music, that with the Bradley kind of music, I think you've indicated that Dr. Bradley had a tremendous impact upon your own personal life.
Yes.
And you think that that could be transferred in a larger sense to other individuals. Is that what you're saying?
And Dr. Haney, yes, of course. Also, Dr. Haney traveled with Dr. W.A. Criswell. He sang in China with Dr. Criswell preached. He sang in Korea, received the Iron Horse Award, and also sang in Japan and in Israel. In all of these places, the music is good. He's known all over the world as having one of the greatest voices that ever been. He was trained by the John Worth at Fisk University, you know, the Fisk University singer. So all of this is so great. And when Dr. W.A. Criswell came back from the seminary, the tour with him, he removed his sign from First Baptist Dallas, where the evangelist Billy Graham, you know, was a member. And I also want to express my concerns and sympathies concerning him and those. And so all of that there, it has been neglected. And that the Sunday School Publishing Board, they didn't even put his catalog in the book, you know, his book in the catalog. Neither did they put Dr. Jamison's book. And I tell you the truth, to me, the National Baptist Convention is nothing but a front for the SCLC today. You know, it's like a cover-up. And these kind, and you know, and Dr. Haney.
Okay, and very good. I was just getting the sense that we had time that we had.
Okay.
That we had left.
Okay.
And so, in a real sense,